travel ban. After months of wrangling in court, a limited version of the president's executive order is set to take effect. Immigration crackdown. The House pushes a bill named after a woman shot and killed by an illegal immigrant in California. ISIS falls in Mosul. A victory for the Iraqi military after troops capture a famous mosque. And remembering Saints Peter and Paul. On their feast day, we take you to Rome for the celebration. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, June 29th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. The Trump administration sets new criteria for visa applicants from 6 mainly Muslim countries and for all refugees. The new rules require a close family or business tie to the U.S. Correspondent Mark Irons has more from the White House. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. After a series of legal challenges, the president's travel ban officially goes into effect tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Visa applicants from the banned countries must prove a relationship with immediate family members in the U.S. before traveling here. But a relationship with a grandparent, grandchild, niece, nephew, or even fiance won't get you in.
The 90-day ban on visa applicants affects people from Sudan, Syria, Somalia, Libya, Yemen, and Iran. Previously issued visas will be honored. Travelers from these 6 countries must prove a relationship with a U.S.-based parent, spouse, child, adult son or daughter, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, or sibling. The move comes after the Supreme Court partially restored the president's executive order that was widely criticized as a ban on Muslims.
How do you feel about the Supreme Court?
Very good, thank you.
The order will also prevent refugees from entering the U.S. for 120 days.
This is very upsetting.
William Canny, who runs the Migration and Refugee Services Office at the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, says the vetting process for refugees is already rigorous.
The security that's involved in the vetting is quite good enough. In fact, it's the best in the world when you look at how we put people through this process.
The Catholic Church teaches that government has 2 duties when it comes to immigration: to welcome the stranger and to secure the border and enforce the law for the sake of the common good. The Catechism says neither duty can be ignored.
There have been no major problems reported at airports around the world in the hours since the Trump administration announced new guidelines for visa applicants from the 6 mostly Muslim nations.
Mark, I understand the interim rules for visa applicants and refugees will remain in place at least until the fall?
That's right. The new guidance will remain in place until the Supreme Court issues a final ruling on the matter. Arguments before the justices will not be held until at least October. Lauren.
Correspondent Mark Irons at the White House. Thank you, Mark. The House is voting on bills that would crack down on illegal immigration and sanctuary cities that shield residents from federal immigration law. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi joins us from Capitol Hill. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. As healthcare stalls in the Senate, the House is moving to make good on another one of President Trump's campaign promises to get tough on immigration.
The House votes on 2 immigration bills. Kate's law would make harsher prison sentences on deportees who re-enter the United States. It's named after 32-year-old Kate Steinle, who in 2015 was shot and killed in California by an illegal immigrant. A second bill would strip some federal funds from self-proclaimed sanctuary cities, which shield residents from federal immigration agents. Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly came to the Capitol to praise the bills.
President Trump has been clear that our borders are not open to illegal immigration, that we are a nation of laws, and we will no longer look the other way. Well, we will no longer look the other way in the interior either.
The president urged the House to pass the legislation. Yesterday, he met with more than a dozen people whose loved ones were killed by illegal immigrants.
My world has been devastated since.
But Democrats like Congressman Juan Vargas of California are critical of the bills. He says the current laws separate families, and migrants breaking the law deserve compassion, not jail time.
You know, if a father and a mother are working for their children and the father gets deported and that father comes back illegally to join up with his family again to work for them, we call that a dad, a good dad, and in most cases a good Christian dad. And instead of saying, you know, we are going to put you in prison now for 20 years, we ought to say, well done, you didn't abandon your family.
The Justice Department's Inspector General has listed California, Chicago, New York, and Philadelphia as places where local police have limits or even cannot share any information with immigration agents. We're expecting this bill to pass the House, but in the Senate, its passage is unlikely. Lauren?
Jason, why is that?
It needs 60 votes in the Senate. And just take, for example, a bill the Senate voted on last year called Stop Dangerous Sanctuary Cities Act. That bill only received 53 votes.
Correspondent Jason Calvi at the Capitol. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is working nonstop to negotiate a health care deal. The next deadline is tomorrow, when he wants to send a new draft to the Congressional Budget Office. Meanwhile, the vice president is setting a long-term timeline.
Before this summer's out, President Trump's going to work with this Congress, and we're going to keep a promise to the American people, and we're going to repeal and replace Obamacare.
Pence spoke out at a factory outside of Cleveland, Ohio yesterday. He also took part in a roundtable discussion with local business leaders to discuss taxes, immigration, and health care reform. South Korea's president arrives in Washington to meet with President Trump and top administration officials. This comes as the U.S. and South Korea work together to fend off threats from North Korea. National security correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reports from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Both South Korea and the U.S. agree North Korea should abandon its nuclear ambitions. State Department officials here have been talking about that for months. But President Moon Jae-In and the Trump administration, including Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, disagree about how to make that happen. So they're hoping this trip will get everyone on the same page.
South Korea's new president, Moon Jae-In, makes the United States his first overseas trip since taking office last month. He's spending 4 days in Washington, meeting with congressional leaders, visiting the Korean War Memorial, and now meeting with President Trump at the White House.
We have a president, President Trump, who very much forms initial impressions of people, and they seem to stick, at least for a while. So I think for President Moon, it's going to be very important that he establishes this relationship. After all, the North Korean issue is likely to be the major security challenge that the Trump administration faces for the next couple of years.
But the U.S. and South Korea disagree as to how to confront that challenge.
They both say pressure and engagement, but Trump will emphasize the former and Moon will emphasize the latter.
North Korea shows no sign of abandoning its nuclear weapons program. The communist regime may be only years away from being able to strike the U.S. mainland. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster says the U.S. is prepared for a military response if needed.
What we have to do is prepare all options, because the president has made clear to us that he will not accept a nuclear power in North Korea and a threat that can target the United States.
Also under scrutiny during the talks, delays in fully deploying a missile defense system known as THAAD. Seoul and Washington agreed last year to install the system, but the new South Korean administration says it needs a thorough study before being deployed.
Also likely to be brought up tonight, expanding economic ties between the U.S. and South Korea, which adopted a free trade agreement in 2012. Now, economic ties were not brought up specifically here at the State Department's press briefing today, but we can tell you President Moon telling business leaders here in Washington he looks forward to a day when even they can expand business into North Korea. Lauren?
Wyatt, has North Korea responded to the U.S.-South Korea call to abandon its nuclear program?
Well, Lauren, North Korea's UN ambassador says his country will keep building up its nuclear arsenal regardless of sanctions, pressures, or even possibility of a military attack. He says the administration, the Trump administration, is pursuing a hostile policy, which they said they will resist. Lauren?
Doesn't sound very good. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee at the State Department. A major defeat for ISIS. Iraq's prime minister declares an end of the terror group's self-proclaimed hold on Mosul. Prime Minister al-Abadi tweeted, "We are seeing the end of the fake Daesh state. The liberation of Mosul proves that. We will not relent. Our brave forces will bring victory." The announcement comes as Iraqi forces capture the compound of a landmark mosque in Mosul. It's a hugely symbolic win, and it's the same place the group's leader made his only public appearance. President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin will meet at the G20 summit in Germany next week. The meeting will take place on the sidelines of the summit. It's the first time the two will come face to face since Mr. Trump took office. Meanwhile, German Chancellor Angela Merkel says European countries will work to find joint solutions with the U.S. on climate change and other issues. Merkel is hosting several European leaders today ahead of the next week meeting. Cardinal George Pell, a top advisor to Pope Francis, is taking a leave of absence to fight sex abuse charges in his native Australia. Pell forcefully denies the accusations.
I'm innocent of these charges. They are false. The whole idea of sexual abuse is abhorrent to me.
Cardinal Pell, who is 76, is the highest-ranking Vatican official ever to be charged in the ongoing sex abuse scandal. Our Vatican correspondent, Mary Shovlin, was there and joins us with more. Mary, what is Cardinal Pell being accused of? Tell us what he is saying.
Lauren, well, first of all, the Australian police say Cardinal Pell is facing multiple counts of historic sexual assault offenses, meaning that these offenses supposedly occurred, but over, some time ago. It's not clear what the charges are related to at this point. The Australian official who's bringing forth these charges, though, says that none of the allegations against Cardinal Pell have been tested in any court, and Cardinal Pell, like any other defendant, has right to due process. So this morning he reiterated his innocence and called these accusations, Lauren, a relentless character assassination, and says he will go to Australia in hopes of clearing his name. Here's more of what he had to say.
I have been completely consistent and clear in my total rejection of these allegations. News of these charges strengthens my resolve,
Cardinal Pell is one of the Holy Father's closest advisors. Tell us what he does at the Vatican.
Lauren, he's a very important part of the Curia here. The Holy Father asked Cardinal Pell a few years back to lead his financial reform efforts in the Vatican, so he's in charge of that office dealing with the Vatican finances. What he's been trying to do is really streamline the Vatican finances and crack down on any corruption there. Vatican spokesman Greg Burke said Cardinal Pell's office here will continue its work during his leave of absence.
How are Pope Francis and the Vatican reacting?
Well, the Vatican is showing Cardinal Pell a lot of support through the statement it made this morning. Spokesman Greg Burke said the Vatican respects Australia's justice system, but he reiterated that the Cardinal had openly and repeatedly condemned as immoral and intolerable acts of sexual abuse against minors. So they highlighted that, and they also noted how Cardinal Pell has cooperated with the Royal Commission in Australia into their investigation of sex abuse, and that while he was bishop, they pointed out he worked to protect children and compensate victims. So the Holy See statement today really shows their support is behind Cardinal Pell as he heads to Australia to face these allegations.
Mary Shovlin, EWTN Vatican correspondent. On a personal note, Mary, I am just so sad to say that this is your last day with us, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of what you've done for EWTN and for News Nightly. I'm going to get a little teary. We are going to miss you, but we have a little something to highlight your time with us, and here it is. Look at all of the reporting that you have done from all around the world. Mary, we're going to miss you. You have a place here whenever you want to come back. Mary Shovlin, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent, signing off.
Lauren, let me just say thank you to you, to EWTN, to the whole News Nightly team. From the bottom of my heart, it has been the greatest honor to work with all of you, so thank you.
Coming up, destroying the 10 Commandments. Less than 24 hours after being placed outside the Arkansas Capitol, a monument crumbles. We'll tell you who's to blame. Plus, remembering a landmark abortion case at the Supreme Court, 25 years later. A man crashes his car into Arkansas's new 10 Commandments monument, less than 24 hours after it was placed outside the state capitol. Police say the man who drove into the monument was arrested 3 years ago for destroying a similar one in Oklahoma. He is back behind bars. The 6,000-pound monument fell and broke into multiple pieces as it hit the ground. A federal judge blocks part of a new Indiana law which makes it harder for minors to get an abortion without their parents' knowledge. The judge issued the temporary injunction after Planned Parenthood and the ACLU sued the state. The Indiana Health Department says in 2015, almost 250 girls between 10 and 17 had abortions. In California, 111 people ended their lives because of the new right to die law in the state. That's according to the California Public Health Department. The law allows residents to request life-ending medications from their doctors if they are suffering from a terminal illness. The Catholic Church considers assisted suicide the direct killing of a human being and therefore morally unacceptable. Today marks the 25th anniversary of the landmark Supreme Court case Planned Parenthood versus Casey. That was Bob Casey, governor of Pennsylvania at the time. The case challenged the constitutionality of several Pennsylvania provisions regarding abortion. While the court affirmed Roe versus Wade, the case also allowed greater state-level restrictions on abortions. Joining us now is Michael New, associate scholar at the Charlotte Lozier Institute. Welcome to the program.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Also at Ave Maria University.
Yes, in sunny Florida.
Yes, in sunny Florida. The Casey verdict was not good for the pro-life movement, but you say that it set the course for more pro-life progress. How can both be true?
Well, both can be true because the pro-life movement really invested quite a lot in this decision. We worked hard electing pro-life presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Between them, they appointed 5 Supreme Court justices. So when we thought that the Supreme Court was going to reconsider Roe in the Casey decision, we thought there was a good chance they would use it as an opportunity to overturn Roe v. Wade. And when they didn't, it was a real disappointment and a real setback.
Well, let's take a look at its. And so that was a setback, but then you were able to make the states were able to actually do more things to restrict abortion. Let's take a look at some statistics. Since 1992, the number of states with parental involvement laws has increased 20 to 37 states, and the number of informed consent laws increased from 18 states to 35 states. Those are pretty big jumps. Tell us about other pro-life laws that have been strengthened.
Sure. I mean, the Casey decision did uphold much of the Pennsylvania Abortion Control Act, which was being litigated at the time. And we've seen about 20 states have passed 20-week abortion bans that would make it illegal to do an abortion after 20 weeks of gestation. We've seen a number of states pass things like ultrasound laws, which would give pregnant women the opportunity to see an ultrasound before an abortion. So we've seen a lot of gains in terms of number of states with clinic regulations. So in a variety of metrics, we've seen a number of laws have been passed. Guttmacher tracks state-level pro-life laws, and it seems that every year we set a record. We had like 92 passed in 2011. We had 70 passed in 2013.
That's amazing.
So states have become very
going.
active passing these laws, and we've done quite a lot to protect the unborn.
We only have a few seconds left, but I want to know, do you think that the Supreme Court will ever get the opportunity to reconsider Roe versus Wade and to reconsider this one as well, the Casey verdict?
I think that there's a good chance that the Supreme Court will reconsider, and it's hard to predict how the Supreme Court may rule on a decision of such a magnitude, but I just hope whatever happens, pro-lifers are shrewd enough to use the legal openings are granted to pursue additional avenues to protect the unborn.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Michael New, Associate Scholar at the Charlotte Lozier Institute.
Thank you.
Earlier this week, a group of pro-life Democrats met with the head of the Democratic National Committee to open a dialogue. They're challenging Democrats to be more accepting of pro-life members. The leader of Democrats for Life says right now they don't feel very welcome in the party.
We made a very strong case that there is strength in diversity in the party, and including pro-life members. When you look at history, you know, we at one time had a 292-seat majority, 125 pro-life Democrats, and we were a strong and unstoppable party.
Day tells Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi that she doesn't see a path to victory for Democrats unless the party opens up to pro-life lawmakers. Up next, a milestone for the iPhone. How the device has changed how children learn and communicate. Plus, celebrating the patron saints of Rome. Today, the church honors Saints Peter and Paul. It's a feast day in the Catholic Church, celebrated with a day off in Rome because the two are patrons of the city.
Chi confessa Gesù sa che non è tenuto soltanto a dare pareri, ma a dare la vita.
The Holy Father celebrated Mass in St. Peter's Square with the new cardinals and metropolitan archbishops. The feast day was established in order to commemorate the martyrdom of the two apostles.
Celebrated on the same day because as the two apostles died here, they were born together in heaven, and that makes them twins. And for a city that loves twins, we were founded by Romulus and Remus. These new twin martyrs would be the ones that would refound the Christian city.
Rome-based art historian Elizabeth Lev says the two men completely changed the course of human history for the church. It's the 10th anniversary of the iPhone, and it has fundamentally changed the way humans communicate. Apple has sold more than 1 billion and has spurred other companies to imitate the device that put a computer and the internet in the palm of your hand. For children, though, it's had an effect on how they communicate, play, and learn. Joining us now is Melissa Henson, Program Director, Parents Television Council. She's going to discuss the effects of this iPhone with children. Hi, welcome back.
Thanks.
Nice to see you. Steve Jobs introduced it 10 years ago, saying that it was going to be a revolutionary product, and only every once in a while does it come along and it changes everything. How has this iPhone and other smartphone devices changed the way that children interact with each other?
Well, I think we've all experienced the phenomena of going to a restaurant and you see a table full of teenagers and they're not communicating with each other, they're all looking at the phone.
Well, they might be communicating with each other, but they're doing it by their phone.
By
right.
talking, right?
There's a funny story of a friend of mine who had a picture at the beach with 10 kids on the couch at the beach on their phones.
On
right.
their phones, yeah. And it really has revolutionized the way people communicate. I mean, I can remember when I was in school being sent with a quarter in case I had to make an emergency phone call. You can't find pay phones now, so you kind of have to have a phone of some kind in order to make a call home in case of an emergency.
When should kids get a smartphone then?
Yeah, see, you can still get the dumb phones, you know, the simple phones that allow you to make a phone call and receive a phone call and do very little else. And I would really recommend that for young kids. Maybe kids 16 and older, it's fine to get them a smartphone, but it's just too much of a temptation and too much of a distraction.
My children cannot listen to this. Thanks a lot. 16, okay. No, we don't have cell phones in our family. Tell us how you can monitor iPhone consumption. That is something I really do worry about because you can get this kind of content, illicit content, pornographic content. It's right there. It's all there with a click of a couple buttons.
Yeah, well, fortunately, the iPhone has fairly robust parental controls. And if you want additional protection on top of that, there are apps that you can install on the phone that will basically mirror for you what your child is doing on their device. So any text messages they might be receiving, any photos they might be transmitting, any phone calls, you can find out where they are and what kind of messages they're receiving and sending.
One of the things I use is Find My Friends on this iPhone, and I can swipe it and say, they're at the park.
Right,
I got it, right? Which is actually very helpful. Do you recommend a detox for families?
Yeah, it's a good idea. And especially, you know, I think it's important to set limits on times and places where phones can be used. So off limits in the bedrooms, for example, or turn them in at the end of the day and mom and dad keep the phones in their rooms until it's time to leave for school the next morning.
Well, you know, because I would think that it would be very easy for people and children to start with some sort of addiction or obsession.
Yeah, absolutely. And it disrupts sleep, it disrupts school. It is problematic for very young kids who haven't learned how to manage these.
Melissa Henson, thank you. Program Director, Parents Television Council.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Finally tonight, as we talk about smartphones and apps, we're highlighting a few apps to help you get closer to God. First, Laudate is a great resource for Catholics. It features prayers, the Liturgy of Hours, Order of Mass, Stations of the Cross, and many other things. The Catholic Bible app features church-approved versions of the Bible, and the Rosary Guide helps you pray the Rosary with interactive beads on the screen. And come on, I have to do this. EWTN, our partners, Catholic News Agency and the National Catholic Register, we all have apps to keep you up to date with the latest EWTN programming and news. That does it for the news portion. For all of us here at News Nightly, to all of you around the world, I'm Lauren Ashburn. We leave you tonight with more of the celebrations in Rome and a look at multicolored carpets made from flower petals. It's a tradition dating back to 1625. Good night. God bless.